this shift of perspective. We have to shift our perspective at times, and that shift is we replace it. So if we have this shift of perspective, we're replacing how it is that we've seen things, how it is that we've looked at things, how it is that we've oh, that's a different way to look at this. And that's what Jesus leads us into in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. See, he came to this earth. That's what we're celebrating around Christmas. But as his public ministry came forward, all of a sudden he's like, hey, I'm here to establish a kingdom, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. And all of a sudden these followers got excited about this kingdom message, because this kingdom message to them meant, there's an overthrow of this Roman oppression. Where is it that you're building your palace? Where can I sit by you when you're on your throne? And all of these things about a progression politically, or a progression that was going to happen militarily. And so here's this uprising that's going to take place. And just hey, time out. Time out. You don't have any of that in the right perspective. Let me shift your paradigm here about what my kingdom looks like. What it is when my kingdom comes to this earth, and his kingdom begins where? It begins in our heart. It begins in this space of our heart. And he says, my kingdom begins here. I'm inviting you into my life. I'm inviting you into what I'm up to. I'm inviting you into my kingdom. And as I'm making this invitation, you have a choice to say yes or no. But as you're coming into this, it's not politically, it's not a military kingdom. This is a kingdom of your heart. This is a kingdom that I'm inviting you into, that you're going to join me in what it is that I'm up to. I am on a mission of what? In Luke chapter 4 said Jesus was on a mission. Hey, I came to set the captives free. I came to give sight to the blind. I came to heal. I came to do all these things. That's what I'm all about. I came for this, and would you like to be involved with it? And as I think about that, does that sound like more exciting stuff than what you're up to? When did you recently set the captives free? Did you recently give sight to the blind? And Jesus is like, this is what I've been up to. And in John, he says, you're going to do that and even greater things. Greater things? Are you kidding me? Greater things he's invited us into, and then we're stuck in traffic. Huh? And this doesn't seem like greater things. But his kingdom is here. His kingdom is now, and it's also a not yet. And so he said, it's like, hey, I'm establishing my kingdom. Would you like to be a part of what I'm up to? Join me on my mission. That sounds way better than the mission that I'm on. It sounds way better when I have the opportunity to step into the life that Jesus has for me. And so when we get in here to Matthew chapter 7, the last part of this, it's 13 to 27. And it's interesting, the angle that this takes right here. Jesus sets the stage that following him has this tension to it. Following Jesus has this tension of its hearing and its doing. See, it's so easy for us sometimes to, and either one of those can get kind of out of balance. We can just, boy, that was great. Good message, Pastor. Well, I don't mind the encouragement, but it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? We can hear it, but how do we do it? And then the other tension is there's a proclamation that we have, but our words have to align up with who we are. And so there's a saying and there's a being. And as we wrap up these words today of Jesus, there's some statements here that he's going to make that are pretty radical. He doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room here to ride the fence. And he doesn't leave, he's rather clear, and he presents us with 4 areas where there is a choice that we have to make. He's calling the listener to consider that there's only 2 choices. Any game show fans? Any game? Okay, all right, we got 2. It's okay, this is a safe place. I love some game shows. Man, what was I watching? The Wheel or whatever was on this last year. That one was good. There was one that started, I looked it up. It started in 1963. It actually had kind of they revisited it even now on CBS. Let's Make a Deal. Come on, huh? People dress up crazy. Okay, I'm old, but I mean, it's like they dressed up crazy, and the host of my childhood was a guy named Monty Hall. Now I'm talking to some people, but I don't know who hosted it this time. I haven't seen it. But I mean, here he would come out, and they would have like what? They would have 3 doors. You got to choose door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3. You guys are sharp. And so oftentimes then there would be there'd be a goat and a farmer or something behind one door. And one door would have a brand new car, and the other door might have a nice living room set from Broyhill. I just remember that brand. I don't know. I just thought of I don't even know who Broyhill is, but it was a brand of furniture because it was always a Broyhill living room. But anyway, that's from watching too much TV as a kid. But came back to help me. See, Mom, it was worth it. But so, I mean, but it was like he had these choices. And Jesus is now coming in, and he's like, he's not really offering us a deal. He's just like, here's 2 doors. Here's 2 of things. Choose one or the other. And when you make the decision, where is that going to lead? Where's that going to take? What is the outcome of you making that decision? So all of a sudden we're going to look at 2 paths, 2 trees, 2 followers, 2 houses. And Jesus is going to present this in a way that it's not about like close enough, like almost. I almost got on the right path. I almost produced good fruit. I almost was a true follower. I almost had the right foundation. No, Jesus is like, he's going to lead us into this space that right here in a world filled with options, Jesus offers only 2 things, and one of them is what matters most. And it's like, what does that look like? I did some research this week. You always have to be leery of my research. But they say the study I found this week said, how many choices do you think we make in a day? Choices in a day. Can't imagine. Well, that's a lot. I have a number, though. 35,000. 35,000 choices it says we make in a day. I get some of them are small. But 35,000 choices in a day. Do you ever wonder why you're tired at night? Because like at some point you're like choiced out. You are choiced out. It's like, I got to get some rest. I cannot make any more choices today. I'm at my limit. I have passed 35,000 or whatever your number is. I'm done. I can't make. Did you know the average grocery store has 42,200 different items? It said in the 90s, the store only had 7,000 items. 42,200 items. I didn't know there were that many kinds of mayonnaise. Like I go shopping sometimes and I have the list. Like I shop with a list. You should. It's better financial planning. But so I go there with the list. Mayonnaise is on the list. You ever watch people in the grocery store? They just get in a daze. It's like, especially a guy whose wife wrote him a list. It's like, I want some mayonnaise, and he's just standing there like, I don't know. There's 39 different choices of mayonnaise, maybe more. And he stands there just dazed. And like, dude, are you okay? He's like, well, I don't know what kind of mayonnaise. Well, let me help you. Just get this best foods, you'll be good. At least that's the normal. That's where it started. And then there's like this hybrid of mayonnaise that's just taken over. 42,200. How about cars? Think about cars. I looked up. Toyota has 110 different models. If you start to add trim lines and accessories and colors, they become overwhelming. It was Henry Ford who said, they can have it in any color as long as it's black. Was that not a simpler time? I mean, the Model whatever rolled off the assembly line. I mean, how many ways can you fix a Five Guys burger? Ever been to Five Guys? There's 15 different toppings. 1 patty, 2 patties, cheese, bacon. Someone wrote a blog and they said that it was, the name of the article was 5 Guys, 6 trillion burger options. I don't do the math, but I mean, if you start doing 15 times and all the exponential stuff, there's a lot. Growing up, it was Burger King. It was way simpler. Have it your way. Have it your way. And Jesus is like, you know what? Here's where we're going. In these verses, Jesus is narrowing down the options. Oh, you can still have it your way, but the outcome of your choice may not be what it is that you're looking for. And so let's jump in. 4 questions that Jesus invites you to answer in these verses. The first one is simply this. What's your path? What is your path? And look at that thought right underneath it. It says, the road you travel always determines your destination. The road you travel determines your destination. Jesus said this, verse 13, he said, you can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad and its gate is wide for the many who choose that way. But the gateway to life is very narrow and the road is difficult and only a few ever find it. 2 paths. You have door number 1 and you have door number 2. There's 2 paths. There's the narrow path. There's the wide path. 2 destinations. Jesus says right there, you can enter the highway. You got the kingdom, or he says hell. You have destruction. So the principle is this: the road you travel always determines your destination. There's a point where you're going to get on it's about trajectory. It's about trajectory. You get on a path, you get on a road, and that path is going to have an end result. How many people drive? Did anybody do some driving over the holiday to get someplace? Just a little bit of driving. How many people used a GPS to get there? GPS. Some of you knew the way. Some of you knew the way because you went to some family, you went to some friends. You didn't need a map to get you there because you already had been to that destination. But if you were going someplace new for Thanksgiving, you may have needed to put in an end point, and then that end point all of a sudden determined the route that you would take. And we have to ask ourselves simply the question, where I am now and the way I am headed, where will I be when I get where I'm going? Where is that? Where is this road that I'm on right now? Where is that going to take me? Where is that going to lead me? 1956. President Eisenhower signed the legislation that started the interstate highway system. That same year, I think they started working down here by the Tacoma Dome. And they're not done yet. So, come on. Does that not seem like they've been working on that forever? But 1956, Eisenhower, he was a president for those of you that are younger, and he was a general in World War II. And he signed the legislation that started that interstate highway system. And all of a sudden, America changed because there was an easier pathway and a route. Some of you were born before that was in existence, and there were more back roads than there were these apparently freeways and these highways to get you someplace. If you drive up to Seattle and you get just about to the dome, there's no dome anymore, but come on, you get like to CenturyLink and the sports stadiums, you can take a right there. And there's a road that starts right there. It's called Interstate 90. It starts right there. And you can get on it, and in 3,085 miles, you know where you'll be? Boston. You'll be in Boston. You can get on that road in Seattle, and in 3,085 miles, whatever that takes you, you will be in Boston. You'll be all the way across America. One road. You don't have to you don't have to set your GPS unless you want to know like where you're at on the journey. But you could turn your car right in Seattle, and however long it took you, you could end up in Boston. One road, whole way across the country. See, Jesus is like, hey, I've got a road for you, but you've got to choose to get on that road. And it's about the direction that you're headed as to where it is that you'll end up. And Jesus is like, hey, there are 2 paths here. Have you ever heard the statement before, all roads lead to God? If you do some study in philosophy and, here's God and then he's a big hub and all these spokes. Jesus is like, no, that's not how I'm talking about here. He's like, there's a path. There is a path that leads to me, but it's not all paths lead to me. There is a path that leads that way. And that last statement is kind of sobering there. It says only a few will ever find it. Wow. A few will find it. You think about that, because there's other statements in Scripture where Jesus is like, hey, God so loved the world that whosoever believes in me will have everlasting eternal life. And then in this passage, hey, only if you're going to find it. The offer is for all. The door and this offer is for all. The acceptance and the receiving of it is a little bit more limited. But it's for all. So don't look at that and go like, well, I hope, boy. No, all can find it. But Jesus like, only a few are finding it. What is finding it? Well, look, earlier Jesus said what? Seek and you will find. So there's this pathway here. And it doesn't mean, though, once you've chosen the path, just put it on cruise control. That would be nice. But no, that doesn't work that way. It'll include, there'll be some resistance along the way. There'll be some challenges along the way, but the Bible's clear that resistance helps to develop our character. It helps to develop us. Second question, what's your fruit? The nature of your tree always determines the nature of your fruit. He says this in verses 15 to 20. He says, beware of the false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit. That is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by the fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. Any Apple fans? Apple fans? The Apple Cup happened. I'm not talking Apple Cup. I know it's a sore subject for the Cougar fans, but we have a few Huskies in here, so they're okay. But the apples, the fruit. Have you noticed, like, there are way more choices in apples than there used to be? I mean, growing up, it seemed like what? They had Red Delicious, and you ate those. They had Granny Smiths, and you could make pie or applesauce. And then there was like a Golden Delicious, and I don't know what you did with that one. So, I mean, now there are all kinds of apples that are out there. Does anybody have a favorite? What? Honeycrisp. Oh, Honeycrisp. Any Honeycrisp fans? They got some no's on that. What do you got? You shaking your head? What? Got some, what? Crab apple. And you like the Grinch movie, too. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on with you. You like the movie Grinch, and you like crab apples. Whew, Merry Christmas to you, too. But, I mean, come on. You're setting it up on a tee for me. I just have to keep hitting it. So, any other Apple fans? Galas, Fuji's, John of Gold, Pink Lady. All right. So there's a lot of apples out there. Do you know today they're releasing a brand new apple? Come on, does anybody study apples? Like, I'm into apples. Today, December 1st, is the release of the Cosmic Crisp. Cosmic Crisp. First apple ever developed in Washington State. First apple ever that has its birthplace in Washington State. The Cosmic Crisp is on its way. And they started working on this apple in 1997. 1997, they started working on it. It's been worked on through Washington State University. They have millions of dollars invested in the Cosmic Crisp. And today it's being released. I was at this fruit stand that I go to a lot about a month ago, and somehow they got some bootleg Cosmic Crisp. I'm just like, oh, what are these? I have not seen these before. And he's like, well, they're Cosmic Crisp. And I'm like, okay. I got introduced to the Cosmic Crisp, and I had my first taste. And wow. And then I went back to the fruit stand. I'm like, where's the Cosmic Crisp? He's like, well, they're coming out December 1st. And I don't even think I'm going to get any because the first batch is kind of limited. But I had a taste of heaven. And so the Cosmic Crisp is on its way. But you think about that. It started in 1997. In the meantime, you can eat a Honey Crisp. But when the Cosmic Crisp comes, I'm telling you, heaven to earth. And God is still at work. But you think about that, and you think about an apple. Think about just an apple. I mean, we're talking about fruit here. Have you ever grabbed an apple with the expectation of what it was going to taste like? Has that expectation sometimes not been met? Like, this is an apple. Like the guy yesterday at the same fruit stand, I bought some Honey Crisp, and then he's like, we got to try these two. So I'm like, all right. He gave me a couple apples. And I tried one yesterday, and then I cut up one this morning on my way into church. And so I ate the second one, and it was disappointing. It was disappointing. I'm like, I expected more. This guy built this apple up to be, he's got like 20 varieties, and he built this one up to be, but there's an expectation, and then you have the experience. There's no crunch. There's a big bruise. The texture is mushy. There's just something about an apple that you bite into, and it has I've been listening a lot about the Cosmic Crisp on some different podcasts. And I know, you're like, really? Like, you've been studying the Cosmic Crisp? I'm an apple fiend. And so, but they're talking about, there's a point of like, there's crisp, there's a crispness, there's an acidity, there's a juiciness, there's all these aspects that make up an apple. And you're like, get a life. I'm like, I have a life. It's about apples. But good fruit is what? It's cultivated over time. It's cultivated over time. This new apple, over 20 years. Someone had the vision in the 90s that it's like, we got to get on the apple train. And we have got to drive this apple to market. And think about what are you doing today? What is it that you're doing today that in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, somewhere down the line there's going to be some fruit. But right now it just seems like a lot of work. Because it's like I'm digging the soil and I'm trying to plant this seed and I'm trying to grow this tree, and I didn't see any fruit this year. Well, no, you didn't. Because it took 22 years to get this apple. This apple didn't come overnight. And somewhere in our life, it's like we have this idea that like there's instant fruit. Like all of a sudden we're just going to, hey, I planted the seed today. Tomorrow I'm going to have a harvest of apples. And like, you are not getting a harvest tomorrow. You got to water it. You got to fertilize it. You got to work on this thing, because at some point, yeah, there's some fruit coming. But and there's some parts of our life where we're going to not even see the fruit. But the fruit's going to be seen by those that come after us. Think about the legacy that you and I have the opportunity to establish in our life. That's fruit. That's fruit. My grandpa died a long time ago. But my grandpa, he was a drunk lumberjack in Astoria, Oregon. That's what he was. But you know, he met Jesus. He met Jesus, and all of a sudden that spun his life around. Kathy Newell, that's been around here, they moved down to Lacey. My grandpa was her pastor at one point. But the drunk lumberjack became a Christian who then got called into ministry. What do you think my grandpa would think today if he was sitting here? He'd be like, hey, there's some fruit. There's some fruit. Wow, that's awesome. And so you and I sometimes, we don't even get to see the fruit of what it is that we're planting now. We don't get to see the fruit of what this harvest is going to be, but that doesn't stop us from being good farmers. That doesn't stop us from doing the work that's going to happen. And the root of your life begins to determine the fruit. And Jesus is reminding us that it's out of the heart. It's as our heart is developed, you and I have the opportunity here to produce some fruit. What did the writer of Proverbs say? He says, guard your heart because it's the wellspring. It's the source of life. And Jesus is like, hey, I'm going after your heart here. This is heart work that I'm talking about in this area. Where's your fruit? Third question is this: what's your claim? What's your claim? The thought is simply this: who you know determines the reward for what you do. Listen to these verses. Not everyone who calls out to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. On judgment day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name and cast out demons in your name and performed many miracles in your name. But I will reply, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws. Whew, is that a little heavy? Yeah, there's some heaviness there. Look what I did for you. You see, what we do for Jesus is no substitute for knowing Jesus. See, in this case, who you know is of great importance. One of our values here at Life Center is simply this: know Jesus. Know Jesus. Because out of that, it sets the right foundation. Jesus invites us into his mission, into his life. Doing things for Jesus separated from relationship with him can create a place where it feels like you're working to secure the relationship. See, it starts with the relationship. The activity comes from that source. See, when we move to that space where we feel like, I've got to do this in order to maintain the relationship, we're in a tough place. Any relationship you have that's built on like, well, if you don't do this, then we're not in relationship. That's not a healthy relationship. That's an unhealthy space to be in. And Jesus is like, hey, I am for you. We start with relationship. We start out of a relationship that's in place. Why? Because he established it. He introduced himself. He's like, hey, I'm coming. You can accept the invitation to relationship. Out of that relationship, there's some things that go on. There's nothing you can do to earn this relationship. So this isn't about action. It's action based out of relationships. See, there might be some good things that we can do. You ever run into I do some funerals sometimes. And undoubtedly the person chose their life on a path other than the narrow path. It just happens. I mean, that's where you stand. And so you open up opportunities for people to speak at the service. What is their number one thing they're going to say? Usually they're going to talk about all the good things they did. Oh boy, this person did this, and boy, I was stuck once, my car broke down, or my bathroom was flooding, and boy, this person, they did this, and they did that, and they did this, and they did that. All of a sudden, they anchor it all to some actions and some kindness. I'm for that. But they had no foundation to anchor it from. All they had was a good deed. They had no relationship to anchor the good deed to. And so the relationship, man, I've done some funerals, and I'm not quite sure what's going on, and then all of a sudden someone shares like, hey, you know what, I sat in the bedroom with them, and boy, they had their come to Jesus moment. And boy, we prayed, and they stepped into relationship with Jesus. All of a sudden, the whole tone of the place changes. It's like, this is awesome. Now all of this stuff has a foundation to build on. It has something to start with. And so there's a tension with that when good deeds become disconnected from relationship. See, doing things with Jesus is greater than doing things for Jesus. Big difference. See, we can do for all that we can. It's not going to ever be enough to gain the relationship that we're looking for. That doesn't work. There's a tension there. See, the relationship should be the basis for the activity, not the other way around. The relationship is what motivates you towards action. It's easy to get busy for Jesus and miss the opportunity for relationship with Jesus. Think about the two sisters, Martha and Mary. If you ever can remember like which one was the busy one working, it's Martha Stewart. I have to put things in my head so I can remember things. That's how I remember that. She's just always, Martha's busy. And then Jesus just has that, Martha. What you're doing, it's good, but it's not the best. Mary's starting with the relationship. Mary's going to start with the relationship, and then she's going to build out from there. Martha's just like, whoa, boy, let's get all the silverware in place, and let's get this. Everything's got to look good. It's got to be a Martha Stewart living. But Jesus is like, no, that's good, but let's start where Mary's at. Let's start with the relationship. Let's start from that place and see what happens, moving ourselves from that. How many type A people? Like, yeah, you want to get it. How many people want to get her done? How many people like, let's get it done and we'll have coffee second? And how many people want to have coffee first? Coffee first, people. Let's grab a cup of coffee before we get to work. Huh? Jesus is like, let's have some coffee before we get busy. Let's build the relationship, and then let's figure out what we need to do. And it's so easy. We live in a world, and some of us, our wiring is just like, let's get her done, and I'll catch up on coffee later, Jesus, because there's a lot of stuff for me to get done. And he's like, hey, let's have coffee first. Look through the Gospels. Look through the story of Jesus. How many times did Jesus stop and have a meal? And it was out of the meal that the good stuff happened. It's like it was out of the meal. Hey, Zacchaeus, I'm going to come over to your house today. Hey, Matthew, let's have a little party. And Matthew brings all of his crazy friends and just like, this is awesome. This is awesome. Matthew's got some really good sinners in the house. This is great. Let's go. Let's go with this, Matthew. Where'd you get all these scoundrels for friends? This is awesome. So many times Jesus had the meal, and out of the meal came the relationship. And so for those of us that are a little more, let's get her done, we might need to stop and have a cup of coffee. We might need to stop and have that coffee and build that relationship and work from that. And the last question is this: what's your foundation? How you start always determines how you finish. Verse 24 says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in, torrents, and the floodwaters rise, and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it was built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. Anybody remember this song? The wise man built his house upon the rock. Wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came a-tumbling down. Come on. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up, and the house on the rock stood firm. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. And the rains came tumbling down. The rains came down and the flood. Come on, you guys. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up, and the house on the sand went splat. Huh? Come on. Are you too old for that? There's a lot of theology in that song right there. They're only the words of Jesus. You look at me like I'm crazy. Those are only the words of Jesus. The house probably looked the same. But what was at the foundation of that house made the difference. There's a 58-story building in San Francisco right now called the Millennium Tower, built in 2008. And since 2008, it has sunk 18 inches. It's sunk 18 inches. You can read about it. I watched something on the news once. And it sunk 18 inches. It's the tallest residential high-rise in San Francisco, 58 floors. So everybody that lives in that house, in that building, I'm sure they paid a significant amount of money to live in this 58-story high-rise in downtown San Francisco. It's 18 inches lower. Can you imagine the lawsuit? Can you imagine, like, people paid millions to live in this place, and their places are worth much less. And they're trying to figure out what to do with a building in San Francisco that's in the middle of town that's sinking. It's down 18 inches. I don't know what 18 inches, that's a lot. You put it up, I don't know my math, but you start leaning 58 stories with an 18-inch drop. I mean, it's going to be visible here pretty soon. And sometimes it's easy to see that the house goes splat, but it's more difficult to see the building that's sinking just a little at a time. 18 inches over, 11, 12 years now? That doesn't seem like much. It hasn't been going at a rapid pace. That building you didn't wake up one morning and say, whoa, 18 inches. No. Can you imagine the smallness of that sinking? that's going on there in that building. And sometimes in our life, well, it's easy. Oh, yeah, I got the splat part down. But how about the part where I'm just sinking? How about the part where I'm sinking? How about the part where it looks like my foundation is okay? How about the part where it's like, well, boy, that building looks awesome. Yeah, but that building's sinking. That building is slowly sinking. And Jesus yeah, I get the flood and the storm and bam, the building went down. But I think for most of us, it's not so much that concept. I think the concept is more just that idea of slowly sinking. What does your foundation look like? Jesus hey, build your foundation on the right source here. The words there that I like in that verse are simply this, that the wise builder, he listened and obeyed and followed. He listened and obeyed. See, I think a lot of times you and I don't have an information issue. We have an application and an obedience issue. We don't need more information. Anybody educated beyond their level of obedience? Besides me. Come on, you have to choose your foundation. Paul writes these words in 1 Corinthians. He says, "For no one can lay any foundation other than the one we already have, Jesus Christ. Anyone who builds on that foundation may use a variety of materials, gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay, or straw. But on the judgment day, fire will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if a person's work has any value. If the work survives, that builder receives a reward. But if the work is burned up, the builder will suffer great loss. The builder will be saved, but like someone barely escaping through the walls of flames." See, we want to build a lasting product. He's hey, start with the right foundation. Build upon me, and when you start building, use the right materials. Man, there's a lot going on here. Right foundation, right materials. Anybody like to do little DIY projects? You ever done it and you've used the wrong material? Yeah, you end up doing it again. You do it again, or it didn't last very long. I live in a house that I built, which is scary. That's scary in a lot of layers of scary. But, but I tried to do it once, and I tried to do it in a way that I didn't have to do it again. Periodically, I got to fix something. But a lot of times it's oh, that's nice. How long do you think these wood floors have been sitting in this church? 100 years? Probably, close to it. Look, they still look great. You got a couple nicks and scratches. They should. That's called character. The floors I have in my house, I bought them already scratched, because then I don't need to worry about them. The correct name is distressed. I bought them distressed because I didn't want to get stressed over someone wrecking my floors. So you can come over, wear your shoes, track in whatever. I don't care because my floors are already distressed and I'm not stressed. So if you tend to think about it when you're doing something, put it in where you're not going to get stressed. It's been a huge help for me. It's oh, this is awesome. Right material. It has eliminated all the stress. But it's going to look good 10, 20, 30 years from now because it's already beat up. But God's hey, use the right foundation. Use the right materials. What is it that you're building? You're building something that's going to last. Anybody a camper? Any campers? Anybody like to sleep in a tent? Yeah, I don't like it, but I've done it. But a tent is different than my house. The bed I have to inflate. The walls are kind of flimsy. If there's any kind of storm when you're camping, it's very uncomfortable. I'm fine if it's raining if I'm in my house. I'm not so great if I'm in my tent. And so there's somewhere in there that God's hey, use the right foundation, use the right materials, because you're building to build something that lasts, and how you start will determine how you finish. And so which question really kind of sticks with you today? We're going to wrap this up. And we got the path. Which path are you on? Because the road you're on determines your destination. It's got the fruit. What's the nature of your fruit? What is your life producing? Or what are you planting now that's going to be harvested a little bit later? Because that's significant. What's your claim? Who do you know, not what do you do? Do you know the right person to line up with the actions that you're doing? And then your foundation. Has how you've started going to get you to a place that you're going to have a preferred finish. I mean, which question? I mean, these are all good. Probably a little bit of all of them for us. But Jesus had just a lot to say here as he wrapped up this sermon. As he wrapped this up, and as he just had that moment where he's just like, you know what? Two choices. There's a lot of choices in this world, but I got two for you. I got two. This one or that one. 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 And you and I, the great thing is he gives us the opportunity to choose. Otherwise, we'd be really strange people. But he gives us the opportunity to choose, and it's in the midst of that choice that life has the opportunity to begin, and our life has the opportunity to whoa, that's not working so good. That's not working so good because you're choosing life apart from me. And I've come to give you life and life abundantly and life to the full. And that's the choice. That's the choice that we each have the opportunity to make.